How long do I have to stay with my employer once I receive the employment-based green card? And what if I have to move overseas? Those are the questions we're talking about in today's episode of Sumner School Business Immigration Basics. So first, the question of how long does an employee have to stay with the employer once they receive the employment-based green card? There is no answer to that question, no definitive answer. There's nothing written, no clear guidance. It really depends on the specific situation. In general, it can be problematic to leave the employer immediately after you receive the green card because it can look like it wasn't a true job offer, potentially. That's not necessarily the case. It can be that a person has to leave the employer soon after they receive the green card for any number of valid reasons, and it really was a true job offer. So if you find yourself in that situation, this is not legal advice, none of the information in these videos is, but in general, I recommend that you speak with a qualified immigration attorney about your specific situation to make sure that you have a plan in place, and B, keep the documentation to document the circumstances around that. So for example, I recently had a consultation with somebody who needed to leave their employment shortly after receiving the employment-based green card. And in that particular situation, it was a layoff situation, and I advised that they keep documentation. They had email communication from the company about their financial situation. You don't want to share confidential information, of course, but this person had a lot of documentation that he can then use if he needs to, once he goes in 5 years to apply for naturalization. And that's most likely the time at which this would come up, when you go to apply for naturalization later. So in general, the employment-based green card is for permanent employment, but permanent does not mean forever and ever amen. It really means long-term. And there's no, like I said, no clear definition of what long-term means. Some immigration attorneys may say you need to stay there for 2 months. Some may say 6 months. But again, I say if you do find yourself needing to leave that employment relatively quickly after you get the green card, talk with an immigration attorney and come up with a plan. But it is possible, especially if you have documentation. The second question, what happens if you need to move overseas once you receive the green card? That may be possible to do. There are a couple of concerns. One is you want to maintain your permanent residence in the United States, assuming you want to keep the green card. If you leave the United States for a year or more, then it's possible that your green card would be revoked. However, that does not mean that it is sufficient to just pop into the United States for a couple of weeks a year and say, oh, I've never been outside the United States for more than a year, when actually your center of life, your job, you've spent the majority of your time overseas. So there are a couple of things that you can do to address this. One is if you know you're going to be outside of the United States for more than a year, or basically living outside the United States for more than a year, even if you come back to the US to visit occasionally, you can file for what's called a re-entry permit. That can be valid for up to 2 years, and it can preserve your permanent residence. So in other words, you can go live overseas. Maybe you have a temporary job assignment there, or maybe you need to be there for family reasons, whatever the reason is. It can allow you to stay outside of the United States for an extended period of time without putting into jeopardy your green card status. You do have to file an application for that, and you have to be physically present in the United States in order to file that re-entry permit. There is, aside from that rule of you can't be outside the US for more than a year at a time, or else you could potentially lose your green card, there is no hard and fast rule of you have to spend at least X number of months in the United States versus Y months outside of the United States. It's really a subjective analysis. And again, I recommend that you speak with an immigration attorney, but the answer here is that it absolutely is possible. And if you know you're going to be outside the US for more than a year, consider filing for a reentry permit, see if that's appropriate for your particular situation. However, keep in mind that even if you file for their reentry permit, that may, if you spend extended periods of time outside the United States, that may affect your eligibility for naturalization down the road. So with naturalization, and we have some other videos on this if you're interested, but with naturalization, you have to show that you've been physically present for at least half of the past 5 years, or 3 years if you're married to a US citizen and if you're filing on that basis. And you have to show that you have had continuous residence for the past 5 years, or 3 years if you're married to and residing with a US citizen. So it could interrupt your eligibility for naturalization or disrupt your eligibility for naturalization if you move overseas. Not the end of the world, but just know that that could potentially be the case and you may have to wait longer to apply for naturalization. So I hope that you have found this information helpful. One additional thing that I want to mention about these topics, especially the first one of how long do you have to stay with your employer once you receive the employment-based green card. Our video in this series, Sumner School Business Immigration Basics, immediately preceding this video is about changing employers during the green card process. So know that that's a potential option as well. I hope you have found this helpful. If so, I hope you'll share this video with a friend or a family member and potentially contact us if you need assistance with a employment-based or family-based immigration matter or naturalization. You can reach us at info@sumnerimmigration.com, or you can give us a call at 804-396-3412. Until next time, I'm Emily Sumner with Sumner Immigration Law.